Well, welcome, guys, to another episode of the Evolution Podcast. Today, I have a fun guest. We're going to be talking about everything from life. We're talking about business, and she's very energetic, and I'm pretty sure she's very eager here to share her story. So, Nicoa, if you want to take it from here.
Oh my gosh. Well, tell my story. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, I'm all about life by design, right? So, life by design, I love mine. That's my 6-word story. I've been an executive coach now for about 15 years after quitting my big corporate job in 2009, like a crazy woman with a stay at home husband, 3 kids, 12 years of age and under, in the middle of an economic downturn. And after a few moments of panic and terror, which came and went off and on over the years, I actually sustained and I didn't end up homeless on the side of the street like I feared I would.
So, what were you doing? What were you doing in the corporate world?
So I was in corporate communications in the beginning and then ultimately human resources and became an executive VP of HR, most recently with a company that was called Allscripts at the time, Mises Healthcare. I was part of that big merger and acquisition efforts. But before that, Thermo Fisher Scientific also helped with the acquisition of Fisher. And prior to that, I was with General Electric for about 9 years. So I have a really typical corporate background, and I still kind of call myself a recovering corporate executive.
Okay, so as a recovering corporate executive that was in the HR side of things. All right, so tell me, what's your funniest HR story? Because you hear some crazy stuff.
Well, the funniest HR
Yeah,
story.
this got to be a good one. This got to be a good one. Yeah.
I don't know the funniest. Some of them are rather dramatic, honestly.
I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
I do recall getting kind of annoyed in moments of my career as an HR professional because I was good. Let me tell you, I was good because I met the people, I knew the people, I was really engaged. But when I would get overworked, I could be kind of snippy. And I had this one kid come in. He was when I was at GE, and he was part of one of those development programs, which I also went through myself. So I got it. Actually, it was right before I had gone through one. So maybe I didn't get it. And he comes and shadows my door and he says, look, and he's like 23. Now I have a 23-year-old, so I get it now too. But he's like, so when am I going to be finished with this assignment? And you're going to make me, the leader of the Center of Excellence over there. And I was busy and I looked up at him and I was like, when are you going to take responsibility for your own career and stop looking at me to figure it out for you? And the poor kid was like, oh, and I said, I'm sorry. Sit down.
That's not very HR of you there.
I know it wasn't. But I'm just telling you, the HR world it's really intense. And if you didn't have those relationships, you couldn't have those moments of reaction. So I don't really know if there's any story to tell other than stories about me.
Okay, so let's talk about stories about you. So you go from corporate exec, fancy, bougie, you got the suit, showing up at 8 a.m., bossing people around. So you go from that gig, and what makes you say, you know what? I'm tired of bossing people around, and I want to go be my own boss.
Hopefully they weren't thinking I was too bossy. But I'll tell you what happened. And it happened back probably, 3 things happened. 6 years prior to me quitting my job, I can remember talking to my mom on the phone once. Now, I come from very meager beginnings, and my father is from Brunswick County, North Carolina, and he didn't have electricity till he was 6. And, it was outdoor plumbing. That kind of conversation in his house was, thinking about life and getting an education and living the way I live today wasn't even part of the story. So I was raised under this understanding that, you had to work hard. You had to, take us to the next level. That was kind of I took that on because my grandfather took them to the next level and my father took us to the next level. And so I can remember sitting there with this pressure of being in this job and making sure I made plenty of money and talking to my mom on the phone one night. And I was just burnt out. I was the only one in a recent acquisition out in the middle of Tehachapi, California. We had just purchased Enron Wind Energy. I mean, the apple had not fallen far from the tree with regards to the HR issues that I was uncovering. And I just didn't know what to do I was just exhausted. I was a mother of 2 at that point, and we knew we wanted to have another kid. And I'm talking to my mom, and I was like, oh my God. I look up into the stars. It was dark. I had stopped the car because my BlackBerry service would go out if I'd gone into my neighborhood. It was that long ago.
BlackBerry, who still uses that?
I know that. I was like, I wasn't put on this earth to do this. Now she tried to reassure me and tell me, honey, you're impacting 10,000 people. It's employees. You're making a difference. And I was like, I'm burnt out. It took me until I thought I was having a heart attack on Halloween night, trick-or-treating with my kid, that turned out to be a panic attack. And then ultimately malignant melanoma that I fortunately was able to take care of. No treatments or anything, but I was able to carve that out.
Yeah.
Still took me another year before my annoyance with my life just put me over the edge. I literally was in a meeting and said, I think I'm going to trigger my contract. Well, easier said for an exec than most people. You can't just walk out, but I did. And I never looked back. It was a coherent physical reaction. I thought, oh my God, that's what I was supposed to do.
So
it wasn't about starting a new business. It was about me saving myself.
So what was it? The stress? Because I mean, we have a lot of people in the business realm that watches this. So let's say, is it the, having to do with because almost like you being the HR, it's like you're being the counselor, the school counselor, you having to deal with all the drama that comes in, and then, everyone's dumping all this stuff like, hey, this and this. And you're like, well, this shouldn't be an issue, but then, okay, fine, I'll bring this person. Then you're a mediator. And then like, well, I have to do this because it's the job. What was it that was stressing you out?
It wasn't the job.
Okay.
I mean, it might have been my CEO, bless his heart. He and I, we were hitting heads at that point.
Just FYI, guys, bless your heart in the South doesn't mean exactly bless your heart. So just go Google it. So
it depends on the intonation, right, Emmanuel?
That is true. Yeah, that is true. If it's bless your heart. Oh yeah.
Oh, bless his heart. Oh, bless his heart. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So you were saying.
I will just say that it was I like to say that emotions are energy in motion. They are what move you, right? So when I am feeling frustrated and overwhelmed and annoyed with life, it's usually not life that's driving me crazy. It's some belief system that I have in me, or some interpretation, or some assumption that I'm living under that's causing me to find dissatisfaction wherever I am. And I'll tell you, not only I did quit that job. And then I went, and what I call now, I created the same circus under a different tent. Started another company, tried to create coaching as an offering, consulting as an offering. I had multiple revenue streams. And then there it was, 4 years later, Sunday night, the CEO of the company I started is texting me, and I'm having the same feeling with her that I was having with the previous CEO. Oh. So who's the common denominator here?
You?
Me. So I share this story because it's really important. As I do my coaching work with executives across the globe now, I find that they think it's the circumstance, but it is actually their own way of being. And as an ontological coach, I'm trained through the Newfield Network and through the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. We take this ability to observe ourselves and begin to have a relationship with that observation that says, why are you feeling this way? Why are you interacting with people? Why did that bother you? Why are you getting triggered by that email or that text? And taking ability to respond to the world. And that's what energy leadership is. If I know myself so well, then, you call it emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, I can say, oh, that makes so much sense, Nicoa, that would have bothered you because you took that person's reaction to you as disrespect. And so, of course, you'd be triggered. What would you rather make that mean?
I've got something for you. So, because from what I'm getting from what you're saying, it's not what's done to you, it's how you internalize what's done to you, right? So, okay, now I have a fun joke. What do you think? Because Gen Zs, they would soon be in a very executive position. So, which means there's somebody out there that's getting your first executive position is 24 years old or whatever Gen Z, and they take things very, 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 very.
I have 6 kids, Emmanuel. So a whole bunch of them are Gen Z.
Yeah, so think about it, because I'm just thinking about a workplace where you have, they're like, oh my God, I'm so triggered by that. What are you?
Well, I would say, oh, you are? Tell me more. Well, what made you trigger? What'd you make that mean?
So I'm very
I mean,
curious.
just you got to validate them. And I did not say you agree with them.
Mm,
And I also didn't say that they still weren't accountable or responsible for moving forward. But I would validate them. Yeah, okay. It sounds like that triggered you. I mean, here's the thing. I don't mean to sound crass, but at a point in time, what has happened and in your history, you have to own that and find your coping mechanisms.
mm.
You own your history. We can't change what happened. We can't change that that's a trigger for you. But how will you cope with it? What skill can we put in place and practice and a habit to help you manage this? Because if you can't manage the job or the circumstance or the boss, then you either change the way you perceive it or you go somewhere else. That's just kind of how that works. Now, I know it doesn't always work in some work environments. So then you can't leave.
Mm.
So you have to own it. You have to say, wow, this is an interesting game they play here. Or that guy's personality must be steeped in his own triggers.
Mm.
Right? If I can see myself in the other person, then I'm much more likely to find my own calm. Because you're perceiving the world in and out of, these energy levels all day long. You're either the victim or the fighter, or you're like, you know what, I'm just rationalizing this and I can work around this. Or maybe I'm the caregiver. Hey, how can I help this guy? He just yelled at me. I wonder what's going on with him. Or maybe it's an opportunity to say, hey, setting a boundary. You can't yell at me, dude. I'm not going to be able to work here very productively if you keep yelling. So what's a win for you? Getting that done without you yelling is a win for me. So let's work something out. You have to take responsibility to speak your truth about what's happening. Or maybe you don't make it a big deal at all. And you go, wow, that was interesting. I let it go.
So now the thing is so I think the number one thing to its growth, in any space, so not being in a position where like, oh my God, I'm triggered or whatever, because you said something key in the beginning. You said, all right, so I worked with the CEO and I worked with this CEO, but for some reason I had the same issue with this one and the other one, but then you took accountability for it, right?
The issue was with me. Here's the question. What am I making this mean? And why? And if I can do the root cause analysis of my own triggers, my own behavior, my own reactions, my own way of seeing the world, guess what? That's subjective. My perception of the world is subjective. I'm not concrete. It's not just who I am. It's not my personality. It's subjective, which means I can change it. I can change it so it better serves me.
So now that's the thing is, but then again, I think it's it's rare where you see people go in a position of like, yes, I will take accountability for this.
Is it? Well, maybe it shouldn't be. That's why you and I are having this conversation. I mean, is it rare? It's rare until the cost is so great that they just can't stand it anymore. And they'll either run away and create the same circus like I did, or they'll finally say, Jesus, man, I keep doing this. What is going on with it? Maybe wisdom, maybe time. But guess what? If you learn the concepts that I'm talking about earlier in life, then you go with the flow. You're less likely to resist what is. That's really kind of the issue. I was just thinking about doing I do these espresso shots on the podcast of Coffee with Nicoa.
Yeah.
In the espresso shot, I want to talk about resistance. And there's this example, this woman that's on Instagram, Ballerina Farmer. She's amazing. She is now pregnant with her 8th child. She gets up 5 days a week and works out. She actually is milking cows and baking bread and shit. And I'm watching her and I'm thinking, Jesus God, how does she do it all? And I thought about it the other morning as I watched her walking with her babies and doing a cold plunge in the ditch at her farm. It's like, oh
she does a cold plunge. Okay.
Pregnant, like big old belly. And I thought, she doesn't resist. That's the answer. She simply does not resist what is.
What do you mean resist? Expand a little bit further. What are people resisting? What's the resistance?
They're resisting what is. Oh my God, my kid just woke up and I've got a 7 a.m. call and she's crying and that's resistance. Oh, that guy cut me off. That's resistance. Instead of, slow down. Guy cutting me off. Or, baby. Okay, let me go get the baby. So she knows what matters to her. She is aligned to her values. And I think about that. My life is a lot less stressful because I don't get triggered. To your point.
Have you done a road trip? Have you driven in Atlanta before?
Yes, I used to live in Atlanta. I lived in
Yeah,
Kennesaw in
yeah.
my little Honda, and it was so much traffic, and I was still using pliers at the time to change the heat, and I remember thinking, I was looking at those people in the fancy cars and all those executives, and I was like, and I was resisting. I was resisting what is.
What I was about to say is, if you've been in Atlanta traffic, there's a lot of resistance. Like, I mean, it's just it's you have to be consciously, like, I did a road trip in Atlanta, and my girlfriend, she one time we had to go, so she drove, and she goes, I never ever want to drive here again, because people don't, like, for instance, turn signals are a recommendation. It's not a necessity. So if you know, it's if you use it, people are like, whoa, what's wrong with you? You just jump, you just cut the lane and brake. That's an Atlanta driving right there. But no, you were saying with the I just wanted to toss that in there.
No, it's the truth. And, you can either be entertained by it and be aware of it and play with it, or you can be annoyed by it or avoid it. Like your girlfriend said, good job. Not driving here anymore.
Well, then again, she's an interesting driver too, so she never gets speeding tickets, which is kind of weird. But anyway, so, yeah. But I can't talk about it. But no, so in a sense, it's too resistant, right? So let's look at it from a perspective of the day-to-day individual. Okay, like, I'm a day-to-day individual. My camera's going a little crazy here for some reason, but a day-to-day individual. And I have, for instance, you have the lady who had 8 kids, but you have someone who's like, I'll give you an example. So I just came from a flight yesterday, and this lady, she works in a local airport, and she also, right after she's done with that, she goes and works another job to 11 p.m. and then she goes to the next job by 7:30 and works till 6. And I'm thinking to myself, but she was smiling also, by the way. She was smiling. I was like, okay, well, I wouldn't be smiling if I had your schedule. But no, so how can a day-to-day person implement the principle of not resisting?
They have to own their perception of what they're experiencing. They have to own it. They have to be able to have that conversation with themselves that says, what am I making this mean? Now, it's not that you go there, and there's value in all. All emotions are just messaging systems. So when I'm annoyed, I might be annoyed because I'm tired, or I haven't eaten yet, or I need to drink more water, or I haven't gotten up from behind the desk all day. So you can have basic primary needs stressors. Like that woman she might have been smiling right then, but at the end of her 11 o'clock shift, she might not be smiling so much. But if you're aware of what is causing the trigger, it could be that just a primary need, or it could be a meaning that's in your autonomic nervous system, like cellular memory of some sort of past trauma. It could be a little T trauma, big T trauma, whatever, doesn't matter. Somebody yelled at, I'm very loud, as you've noticed. And there was a time when I was 7 years old where my brother and I were laughing at a restaurant, and it was typical Nicoa, big old guffaw laugh, mouth wide open. And he leaned in and said, Nikki, be quiet. Those people at the other table can hear you. So what did I learn? And I'm sure there were multiple moments where I was told to hush, as we say in the South. And I learned that I was too much, right? I'm too loud. I'm too much. It's not okay to be me. It's not okay to authentically laugh like I would typically laugh. Because why? I just was told that I'm responsible for those people's reaction over there, which we all know is bullshit. But at the end of the day, that's how we get brainwashed to believe, oh, I got to be careful what people think of me. Oh, I got to keep it in the box. So the person needs to know that about themselves. So sometimes, I'm coming on strong in this conversation. We're kind of like getting.
No, but I like the energy though, because then again, it's as human beings, we all feed off of each other's energy. So imagine
we need that voice is there. Are you too loud for him? Does Emmanuel? Is this what he wanted? Is this okay? We just met. So, but it's not that I go there. It's how long do I stay there? I've been there for about a fraction of a second. Like, I'm not even worried about it, right?
No, but then again, it's interesting. So you said something about cellular trauma. Okay, that's the first time I'm hearing that. I know what's his name? Tony Robbins has a thing where, like, let's say a kid growing up at 4 or 5, for instance, right? It's like, whenever they allowed, the parent like smacked them on this side of the shoulder, right? But it kept happening continuously, and then now they're adults for some reason. Then you touch them here and they twitch, and you're like, okay, what just happened there, right? So is that an example of a cellular trauma? What would necessarily mean?
Well, cellular means that your cells have memory, and your emotional system has memory. And no matter, and I'm not an expert, I don't want to imply that I'm an expert, but I will say you have enough memory that it kind of gets embedded into you. So the only way that we can actually undo that history of that trigger, like my embarrassment of being loud, or someone feeling not enough because their parents yelled at them all the time about not getting straight A's, or someone is, flinching because they had physical abuse, or even just a touch can cause memory in that side of the body. you know Once we get into the subconscious, which I do a hypnotherapy approach called rapid transformational therapy, where people still have that block of that history. And so we go in and we kind of find those root cause scenarios, those historic moments that typically people know. They think about them, like me telling the story about my brother yelling at me. And then in those moments, we rewire the brain and we remind the little version of Nicoa that, hey, it made a lot of sense that you would be insecure after that. But you're an adult now. You can be as loud as you want. Some people will want to play with you and talk to you, and some won't. And it doesn't matter what they think, because you have a set of values and a way of being that's authentically you. And so once we rewire the brain, then that's no longer a roadblock. And I think there's other practices out there like EMDR, different types of therapeutic practices that people can apply to help them get over the flinch or the insecurity.
Interesting. So now I want to ask you this. So one of the common traits that they find with CEOs is narcissism, right? It's an inner sense of narcissism, right? And there's an element, not commonly, but this is generally with entrepreneurs, there's a sense of past trauma in some way, shape, or form. Not all of them, but mostly they've experienced something in some way, shape, or form that like stuck to them, right? That kind of drives them. So now this is my do you think in a way having a this can go both ways, right? Do you think in a way, like, because I'm thinking from a perspective of somebody who's watching this and is like, they've had so much terrible stuff happen in your life and they have that trauma and they believe that they can't accomplish anything, right? They don't believe like, they can do anything with your life just based off of their upbringing, right? Like, oh, someone's like, oh, I grew up in a trailer park. Or wait, I'm in this country, I can't do this. Now I'm very curious what your perspective. Do you think that the trauma can also be a defining force for success? Or is it something someone should get rid of?
Well, you can't get rid of it. First of
Okay.
all, you can't get rid of it. So that's the first thing. That's accepting the isness, just like in the moment that we talked about. You cannot get rid of what your past has created for you. And therefore, don't resist it. We're back to the same messages. If I can accept it and see it as happening for me, there it is, versus to me. Now, some people are like, you mean that the sexual abuse or the physical abuse or the verbal abuse was happening for me? I beg to differ. Well, I beg to differ, because I do think that, as we all have different belief systems, but I believe that we are these souls that come into these physical bodies to have an experience. And I mean all the experiences, all the sensory experiences, from murder to orgasm. I think we're supposed to be down here having these experiences, the yin and the yang, the good and the bad. And therefore, that's creating a foundation of experience for you to find your purpose, to find your passion, to find your way of being. And if you can observe yourself long enough, you'll know, oh my God, I'm a control freak, or I can't delegate at work. Why? Can I leverage that inability to delegate, or at least acknowledge it and put it on the table between me and my employees, so they know I have this historic way of being that I'm working on? That would be the key for any leader who, I can't speak to narcissism. I'm not trained in that understanding, but I can tell you a narcissist is not likely going to want to observe themselves. They're not going to likely want to make those changes. They don't even see the block that others are perceiving as getting in their way of success, or getting in their way of treating the employee the way the employee wants to be treated. So, there's a lot in that. I will say that we as individuals have to recognize that suffering usually comes when the other person doesn't show up for us the way we wish they would. I mean, really think about that for a minute. I even reposted a guy the other day. He said, anger is you getting upset, you abusing yourself for the behavior of someone else. So
you think we suffer more based off of our expectations of others?
Yeah, when we have an attachment or an expectation, it's like we're in our own little play. Like I said, we're the common denominator. We're like the main cast person, and everybody else is showing up in the play. And then we think we've written these scripts
Yeah.
for everybody to play out. And we're like, oh, I like you and you like me. Let's hang out, right? Oh, wait, why didn't you tell me you love me right then? Or how come you didn't hold my hand? That's not what I had playing out in the play. That's not what I wrote on the script.
Interesting. No, that's very fascinating. So there's a disconnect between what people they think they want in their head and what they communicate with others, right? Like for instance, most people, like you look at the American, marriage and divorce rate, where a lot of people are getting like separated in marriages, but mostly they're like, well, there was an interesting so there was this lady, she works in the airline industry, so we're having a conversation, and she was married for 19 years 20 years, and she got divorced, and I was like, okay. So I'm very curious, so in my perspective, I'm very curious as to what led to that. So she was like, well, he was a narcissist, and I was like, okay, but 19 years, I'm pretty sure you must. I'm like, how long did you guys date before? She goes, 6 years. So I'm like, was he a narcissist 6 years prior? She goes, yeah, but it wasn't that bad. I was like, okay, so what happened? But then again, there was still the element of story that I didn't understand. But when I started diving deeper, she started talking per se. She was like, well, he wasn't doing this, he wasn't doing that, he wasn't doing this, he wasn't doing that. And I asked her, I was like, did you actually ask him to do any of that stuff? And then there was a part of her brain that was like, well, we've been together for this long, so he should know. And I'm like, you just said he was a narcissist. So there was a lot of disconnect that didn't happen there, but that happened in it. And I started understanding. I was like, and you have the conversation. People say it's a lack of, this is what I expect.
Right.
But I don't tell you I expect that. It's
Right.
like, I expect you, like, when you're in college and you have that friend that wants to borrow your car, and you give them the car, and you expect them to bring the car back with the same gas level that it was at, but then bring it in lower, and then you're angry at them, and then they're like, why are you angry? I was like, well, look at my car. You didn't bring it, you didn't bring it, you actually use the gas and to bring it back. And they're like, well, you never told me you wanted it. And I'm like, well,
right.
You're supposed to actually put gas. But then again, there's that disconnect, right? It's
no,
like,
you're right. It's an assumption. We make all these assumptions and then we hold you accountable to it. And you're like, wait, what? So, what happens in marriages, and I'm in my second marriage. So I was married 25 years.
Okay. So what, if you don't mind sharing, yeah.
No, I don't mind sharing, because, he and I both know that we were, my father told me my parents got divorced when I was 8, and they got back together 5 years later. It was the weirdest thing. My dad told me that when sometimes people come together like this, and they really lean on each other and they need each other. And then somebody starts standing up and they're kind of like, I see the world differently. I'm learning and growing. And the other person's like, no.
Yeah.
I still need you. The ultimate goal in a marriage should be that you know who you are, right? And we all do things in this life based on what we think is supposed to be happening. And we're convinced. And then we wake up one day and we're like, wow, that's no longer serving who I am today, because you're constantly changing. You're constantly evolving. And if these two people choose to come together like this, or even in this case, where they are willing to consciously work together and say, oh my God, I see you, right? I can see how you made it mean what when I said that, or I didn't say something. What did that feel like for you? That takes so much guts, but it's possible. And the other person's like, yeah, I'm just really pouting over here thinking that you don't love me because you didn't hold my hand, whatever. But what do we do instead? We don't talk about it enough. And we numb out. We drink, we spend money, we eat food, we collect Beanie Babies, whatever it is. We are not actually having real conversations. And I'll have clients call me and say, well, I wish I could tell my boss ABC, and I'm really frustrated. And I'll say, well, you just told all that to me. What if you did tell your boss that? You mean exactly that? Yeah, exactly what you just told me, your truth. And then we uncover all the fears, uncertainties, and doubts about what speaking their truth would really create for them, because then they'd have to be held accountable to their truth. So, I don't know if that resonates or makes sense, but
no, that does make sense. So now that brings me to my next question then. So, let's say I'm thinking about it. Someone is looking online, and you have someone who's, let's say, because you're an executive coach, let's say we have a CFO or you have a CMO, somebody that's like, the CEO's like, ugh. what is that one thing that's going to say, you know what, I actually need to contact Nicoa? What's that one problem that, that what are the common problems you see when they come to you?
Typically they are frustrated, and they're frustrated with themselves. If they've been in the executive C-suite for long enough, they know that they've got a block. If they can't find satisfaction and peace in the current role or where they are in life, and it's usually not the role, it's usually life. I mean, I'm an executive coach just because I have a history of being in the C-suite, and that's the network of referrals that come to me, but it's all life. And I bet you we spend more time talking about them and their kids and them and their spouses or them and their parents. And, a lot of people sandwiched right now, and how to deal with life. How can they find their own peace and satisfaction and their wholeness? They come to me when they're feeling some sort of pull, and they're on the verge of tears, or they're on the verge of throwing the dishes across the room. And what we and that's just one category. That's the frustration category. Help me help myself. The other category is, I'm ready to run this company, or I'm ready to leave here and I'm ready to go start my own. And I want someone to be the sounding board that's been there, done that, and also can coach me and call me out on my shit. So I hope you're explicit. Sorry.
No, absolutely. That's fine. That's fine. You can. That's fine. It's.
Those are my favorite, though. The ones that they're ready to take that next step. I mean, they're all my favorites. You're all my favorite clients, if you're listening. But I do love growing people to their next level and helping them overcome that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I think that really is kind of the sweet spot for this type of coaching, because we ultimately get you back to yourself. Help you remember your wholeness, that you are enough, and that if you are so led towards this next step, or leaving, or having a new conversation with your partner or with your CEO, that you've got everything inside of you that it takes to do that. And I'm here to reassure you that you do. And I foster and facilitate the conversation to pull that out of you, so you can really feel solid in your stand, and that you know how to move forward towards your goals and your deepest heart's desires.
So, okay. So, but I think the first is because I notice a lot of people in leadership positions, there's a sense of ego. I can do it myself. I don't need anyone. Like, I'll give you an example. So recently in my business, obviously you mentioned it, we had the VA service, and now we're expanding to very realms that I didn't think was possible, but now we're expanding. But I realized before we expanded, I realized that I was the problem in the business. Right, which is very interesting to actually think about it as far as like being the problem. But I give you a scenario. So we were limited as to how much work we could accept because I refused to delegate. Right, because you mentioned that, and I refused to delegate because from my perspective was like, there was no one that could do it quite as good as I did. And then, I started, my personal assistant started helping out. I taught her a little bit, and then now we started bringing on more people, and now we're like, oh wait, we can actually scale our outreach to get more customers because I don't have to rely necessarily on me, and we can actually scale our recruiting system to get more people in the pipeline. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is like it took an element of accepting, just same thing, not resisting. And just to give you another scenario, so my I do boxing usually like twice or three times a week if I can. And my boxing coach which is interesting because I give him business advice, right? So he's like, so I was like, hey, okay, what do you do? He's like, I'm a nutrition coach. I do this and this and this and this. I was like, okay, good. What's your outreach system like, right? I always like, whenever people talk about the business, I'm like, what's your outreach? Because he's like, I want to scale. But I'm like, what's your outreach system, right? So he's like, oh, this. I'm like, all right, do this and do this and do this. And then a week later, he's like, dude, like, you won't believe I did exactly what you told me and everything's going good. And he's like, oh, because it works so good, there was this other client of mine that's like, he wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, but then the old me, because I knew I did all the work, would not like referrals or clients, because it was like the more people you get, the more work. So there's a sense of anxiety that comes with it, right? But now that I'm
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. No, say no.
That's it. There's a sense of anxiety. That's where I would go as your coach. I was like, tell me what the anxiety feels like. Where is it in your body? Well, what are you making it mean? And you would say, well, I don't want to have extra work. I don't want to have too much work, and I want to make sure it's done well. So that makes sense that you'd feel that way. What are some options though to continue to feeling good? So we would find what is your vision is? What do you want your day to be like? So you might start saying, well, actually, I don't want to have to be doing this all day long. I'd really like to have 5 days a week that I could go box. So we try to get to the feeling and the lifestyle that you want. I want you to create a lifestyle. And then it becomes really clear that, you know what? If I just gave that girl a chance to help me with that one thing, I could go and create that lifestyle. And you just take it one step at a time. It doesn't have to be all at once. It's kind of like I'm about to do a big retreat in the spring. And I used to never want to do retreats. And I'm like, I don't know, man, I have to get up and give them food.
Yeah. Well, why feed them? They just say, hey, we're on a fast.
Like, that could be like on for 3-4 days, Oh my God. I used to do that in the corporate world. And then all of a sudden I've gotten myself to a space, and this will probably help you also see why you began to attract differently, is that I finally got myself to a space where I love everything that I do. And I'm so taking care of me so well. My life is very comfortable. I always talk about a life by design, the kind you don't need a vacation from. And I have a very nice life. And I worked really, really hard to get here. And all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I would like to host one of those retreats. I would like to give someone else that experience. And it just became an easy, intuitive, like I was led. And I am attracting people like that. We've already filled it. I haven't even marketed it yet. Because people are vibrating where I am vibrating. And you are now beginning to vibrate at a higher space of generosity and giving. And it came right back to you. So it's all energy. It's physics. Like we are vibrating. If you're vibrating in fear and I don't want to do that, then it's resistance and it repels. But when we sit in a space of, well, what could make that possible? Well, I don't want to do it yet because I'm not quite ready to give my time and energy to that. Or maybe a year from now, I think I'm ready. And then there it goes. It's natural. It's easy. It's flow. It's amazing, really.
No, it's interesting what you say, and which, by the way, can you give us more context on the retreat?
Oh, yeah. It's at Bald Head Island, North Carolina. For those of you who know the coast, this is a beautiful remote island where you can only get there by boat. And I've grown up visiting there with my family for vacation. So we're going to do a 4-day event. This is our maiden voyage, if you will. That's all inclusive for women who need someone to take care of them and help them remember their wholeness. It will include good food, yoga. You'll be walking on the beach. You'll be walking in the nature preserves of the island's forest. There'll be opportunities to read a book that we're going to reflect on and do a lot of journaling and self-reflection, because at the end of this 4 days, we want you to remember you have everything you need to move forward. You'll have access to myself and a woman named Donna, she has an organization called Journey with Donna. And I just spent 2 weeks with her in Spain on a sailboat in the Balearic Islands, where she role modeled some of the elements of this type of retreat with me and 9 other women on this really cool sailboat. And so we're going to pick up some of the things that she offers, along with the energy leadership work and the self-coaching work that I do, and create this beautiful 4-day event. And we'll be launching the information about that next month. And like I said, it may already be filled, but hey, if you're paying close attention, first come, first served.
Awesome, guys. We'll put the link there because as you were talking about it, I wanted to go, but then I was like, it's for women, but I was
I have to do a men's only at some point. The truth is, men need events like this. I'm in my second marriage now, and my husband and I talk about it a lot. I mean, men need help opening their hearts and finding their connection between head and heart and body again. They are too buttoned up and they have been told to restrain, and they were too much for too long. Don't cry. Keep your act together. Show up. Be a man. And oh, by the way, we now want you to be feminine and vulnerable and flexible. And yeah, they need some help. I feel for all the men out there, and I know that's not necessarily a popular topic for women.
No, it's not a popular topic, and it's also interesting because we were going to talk about something. Is I know in prayer podcast we talk about the American dream, and the I'm an immigrant myself, and per se, it's a weird thing because growing up, my father always kind of pointed out to me that it's a survival of the fittest. It was like it's a competitive world as a man. To be a man, it's like because and he gave us if he gave a valid scenario, and he was like, so there was we have in my home country, there's pretty much they have them in California now a lot. Homeless people on the streets, right? There's a reason why I use California, but so there's homeless people on the street. So back home, but usually most of the homeless people we had because we don't have a social security system like America where if someone's disabled, they're taken care of. So pretty much you'd have like people who were like dismembered, like begging for food, begging for money. And he basically pointed out because there was a young kid that was there, and he said, he said, as a man, right now, if you were to be in the same situation, no one's gonna pick you up and like, hey, move in with me, live in my house, all that stuff. And he's like, if they're trying to do that, they're trying to kidnap you. But then he's like, but he goes, if you were a decently attractive woman, you would be here. And if they saw you, the first color put up like, Miss, ma'am, listen, I will be your husband. Let's go right now, get married. And then he kind of gave that scenario there, and he's I was very young at the time, and I still didn't listen for a while. But the main point he wanted to point out to me, because when you're a teenager, all you want to do is just like be talk to this girl, that girl, this girl, and he's like, dude, you got to take your education seriously, because if you flunk out, you're out of the house regardless. If you're on the streets, no one's gonna come save you. And I kind of thought about that, and then that's for me. It was weird because in the business world, it's interesting in the business world. Coming up in the beginning, it's a dog eat dog world. I think so in the beginning because you got to get a name for yourself. Dude, you look like you disagree. I think you disagree with.
Well, I don't disagree. I think what you're saying is based on your perception and based on how you were raised and all of the influences. And do you know that 75% of the world kind of hangs out in that competitive conflict, that fighter, the dog eat dog world? We really do see the world that way. And the reason we do that, and there's a lot that you threw out there. Let me pick that piece up just for a second. One of the reasons that we hang out there as competitive is because we think that we're connecting. The human being wants to connect with another human being. So we've mistaken commiseration with connection. I mean, we do connect over it, but it's not long-term sustainable. And it causes a catabolic charge to hit all of us. We end up in war. We end up with, big fences between our houses. I mean, all sorts of things that separate us. And we're commiserating over the gas price or over the politics, and we spend a lot of time fighting. And I think that the American dream is a game, but it's heavily influenced by that belief that more, better thinking. Like you're not enough. You are not enough unless you compete. You are not enough unless I, pay for the creams that keep my wrinkles away. I put my hair down beforehand and I was like, oh, can you see my roots? I'm literally brainwashed. We are all brainwashed in this game to think we're not good enough. The man on the street begging has just as much value as, Jeff Bezos or whoever, or you or me. It doesn't matter our lot in life. We were born enough. We have value. And there's a reason we're here, even if my reason is to beg on the street. And I know that sounds a little odd. And I have traveled the world. I've been to over 30 countries. I've been to India 3 times. I have seen people begging on the streets with their babies. And I've asked those cultures and those leaders and those companies that I worked with there and said, tell me how you reconcile this. Do you compartmentalize this? And in India in particular, the response was, we all have value. We all have a lot in life. They're all in a caste system. So everything comes back down to, what are you making it mean? I'm going to make it mean something different than you are. I was raised different. And the game of the American dream, I woke up one day having won the damn thing and was still miserable. So get this. So the takeaway here is, it's your life and you can't get it wrong. So just go live a life that aligns to the values you decide to have, and aligns to the behavior you want to experience, the sensory experience that you want to have that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Gotcha. And you know what you said, it's 100% valid, but I'm also thinking about it from a perspective of somebody who is running the rat race, right? For the most part, because I believe a lot of people who end up starting their own business eventually think outside the box, because to be successful, you almost have to do things contrary to, not necessarily contrary in a law breaking way, but contrary in a way of like how you approach things. Like, for instance, networking is a big thing in business, right? Like, in a W-2 job, you're taught to not make any friends, because the more friends you make, the more like, oh, things might go wrong. But then in a business world, you have to get a network. So it's almost opposite. Then, so the way I'm looking at it from a perspective is also another thing. Just, I wanted to talk about the part where you said we all have value per se. So I want to talk about this in a sense as to, human beings are very status driven, right? We're very, which
Some are.
but majority of people are very, very, very status driven, in a sense as to, I'll give you an example. So we were in Orlando recently for, I can't remember, we just went for like a vacation kind of deal. And when we go on vacation, we like to nice things when we travel, right? So we got a nice car, we were driving around the streets, but we were getting all the stares. Like, people were just staring, right? Staring. My girlfriend, it was just stares. We were in a convertible. It was a nice Mercedes, and I kind of thought about it myself. I was like, because I have a Honda Accord, and I love this car. I'm not getting rid of it. This car, we have memories together. And when I drive that, people were like, who cares? But when you are like getting attention, people, there's the who is this person, this rich, even though it's a rental, this guy's rich prick, or people like, oh my god, I want to be this person, right? Kind of like, remember when you were driving,
Right.
you're like, you're driving Atlanta, right? And I'm thinking to myself innately, right, what is the reason why for most people, you accomplish all this, you get all the titles, you get all this stuff? It's because deep down there's a sense of, like, you remember you said the word validation, right? You have a Gen Z that's,
Yeah,
it's deep down, we want, most people, because as kids growing up, we always wanted our parents' validation. Like, for the longest, I wanted my dad to tell me he was proud of me. But then again, it was like, I could have just told myself I was proud of me,
yeah.
right? But then we're driven by all these things because deep down we just want the word like respect and our peers to notice us. Which is
That's
interesting.
learned, though. That's learned. You're not born that way. You're born crying. You're born saying, I am so enough. I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs so you can come over here and feed me and change my diaper. Thank you. I'm not saying, excuse me, Mom. Sorry to bother you. I don't want to. I know you're sleeping over there, but could you please help? Let me be clear. Everything that you're experiencing, all these belief systems, there's a reason why one guy's watching you going, look at that guy go, heck yeah, man, look at this cool car he got. I love that. Good for him. And the other guy's going, must be nice. It's because of the way they were raised. And it was the culture and the marketing. And, let me be also clear about, this is a game. So if you either you're in the game or you're out of the game, but you can't be half in or half out. Because you can't sit around judging it as not being good, but then wanting it at the same time. This would be controversial. It's people talking about how, I can't believe, and I'm not to be political, but Donald Trump, I did not vote for him, but I would defend his right to be well off. He cheated. But anyway, people like, but his daddy gave him that money. I'm like, which American dream are you wanting? Just because his dad did it the way you think the American dream is supposed to happen, and then he got handed the money and the silver spoon, you can't condemn him for being born into that. Worst example, sorry, but I'm just trying to say. How can I judge you for being successful and only commend the guy that pulled up his bootstraps and is still working really hard to make all the money and make it?
What's interesting about that is, when we're using that story, is an element of relatability, right? People want to feel like, everyone believes it's a game, but people hate on the people that basically had a head start in the game, right? But then again, which is also interesting, because I started understanding that, and in a way, I actually realized that haters are actually good, because I started understanding this is because people hate on people that they believe, they remind them of what they don't have or what they could have. So the only way they can justify, like, oh, well, this person must be a rich prick, or must have, no one ever, like when let's say a Lamborghini pulls up to a gas station, no one is like, oh, must have his PhD. They're like, it's probably a drug dealer. Right. So it's like using that scenario. It's like people, it's a way of rationalizing why they shouldn't take action towards that, because they say, oh, it's probably illegal, that's how he got the money, but not understanding, like, if you had a business and you had 20 people working on there, and you charged 2,000 to 3,000 a piece, and then your spread was 60%, you may had enough money to afford the car. But that's because it's the same thing as you mentioned something, which is, I believe that there was an element of a programming, right? Like, one of the things I had to come to understand is you cannot succeed in business selling time by the hour.
Right. It's unless you look at it as simply your own value.
Yeah. So unless I'm charging $10,000 an hour, then yeah, okay, and I get 5 to 6 appointments, I'm making 50,000 a day. Yeah, but basically, who's gonna pay 10 grand an hour, right?
Well, we were laughing when I was talking about pricing this retreat. My partner Donna, she and I were like talking through it, and she said, well, we got to make sure we put our fee in there. I said, well, I'm not going to make my fee. I get way more. Yeah. But I did it really matter of fact. And she kind of looked at me and I was like, oh yeah. I said, the amount of money I'll probably make on a 4-day retreat, I could make in half a day. And she was like, really? And I was like, well, I sell an experience. I don't sell by the hour. It's an experience and it takes hours to create. But they pay for the value of that impact and the ROI for their employees when they walk away from the experience. And she's like, I need to learn how to think differently about my value and the value I bring to the table. And, I think that we all have a compare despair dynamic, though, just to take it back to what you were talking about around the cars and how we're programmed. And it's okay. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be pissed off. And it always comes back to looking at yourself in the mirror. And if you can look at yourself in the mirror and love you and like you, then it's a lot easier for you to love and like the other person, no matter what lot they're bringing to the table here. I mean, to mix metaphors, but, I can see myself in the drug dealer. I can see myself in the CEO. I can see myself in the murderer. I can see myself in the religious figure. If I can find that connection, which is this level 6 energy and this concept of energy leadership, then I am you and you are me. And we're all in this together. We're a collective consciousness that's moving the world forward. And I'd prefer to be there. It makes it a lot easier and I don't resist anymore. I'll never forget seeing Saddam Hussein. They put him on the news and they put a noose around his neck. Show the world that we were retaliating, and he murdered thousands and thousands and thousands of people. But for a flash of a second, I saw the Father in his eyes. I saw the human. And I thought about how he must have gotten there. And I had compassion. Now, my father at the time was like, oh, I can't believe you have compassion for him. He's a murderer. And I was like, okay, but I can get there. And if I can get there, guess what? Like energy attracts like energy. Maybe you can get there. And maybe you'll talk to 5 more people that can get there. And it truly is be the change. And if I can calm my nervous system and I can remember, it makes sense, Nicoa, that you would react that way. Hey. How do you want to react? How do you want to respond? What would peace do? What would love do? What would compassion do? And that's my job. That's my job. That's the only way I think we're going to get out of this more and more better, compare, despair dynamic of living.
Well, it's interesting as you saying that. Are you familiar with the church Elevation?
No.
Yes, it's a church. It's based. I'm in North Carolina right now, but it's based out of North Carolina. It's a church named Elevation by Pastor Stephen Furtick. And as you were just saying that, I was like, oh wow, I felt like I was like it was an early Sunday service just started right there. I was like, all right,
preach, baby,
amen, preach. No, preach. But as we're wrapping up here, so what is any last words for the viewers watching this?
Where the mind goes, energy flows. So where you put your focus is what you're going to manifest more of. So you can focus on the resistance. You can focus on your anger, your frustration, your victimhood, or you can forgive everyone for not knowing any better, or forgive yourself for having made some choices that maybe you're judging today, and step into a space of forgiveness so that you can move forward. What's possible here? That's then. This is now. Focus where you want to manifest more of and anticipate it. Begin to anticipate what you want. use your words as a wand. As a man thinketh, so is he, right? And the language, we spell our words. I mean, these are my favorite things to tell people. We don't call it spelling for nothing.
No, that's no. I like the concept of thinking. You know, there's I can't remember what the author's name is, but he goes, the way man thinketh, so it is. Oh, that's in the Bible, but it's like
as a man thinketh, so is he, and it's by James Allen.
Yeah, that's the one. Just yeah,
about 120 years ago. So that book has some religious elements. For those of you that are, you know, if that's not something you're interested in reading, you can read past that.
Yeah,
and it really is as is above is below. So as whatever thought I have here. Your mind only responds to the thoughts you give it and the pictures you create in your mind. That's how you manifest your reality. And, you know, this is nothing new. You and I are talking, we're just combining all the resources out there and putting it on the table in this format. But it is possible. You don't have to, suffering truly is optional. Pain can happen and, you know, frustration can happen, but it's up to you to step into, okay, what's possible, what's next, and what do I want, and how's what I'm doing getting me what I want.
Interesting. I love it. Now, obviously, for the listeners here, where can people find you?
You can find me on my podcast, which I'd love for everybody to go right now and subscribe and download. And it's Coffee with Nicoa. That's Nicoa, Coffee with Nicoa. And you can also find me at the same website, coffeewithnicoa.com. There are 10 free coaching videos that you can listen to for you if you go into coffeewithnicoa.com. Also, if anyone's interested in learning more about rapid transformational therapy and the work that I do to really help you overcome those subconscious blocks, you can go to my referral site, which is Nicoa, Nicoa.coach, Nicoa.coach.
I love it. I love it. Then again, guys, the links are going to be in the description. Definitely check it out. It was a very vibrant, energetic conversation. I love it. There was a part of me that was like, I should have you as a host on one of the hosts on the show, because I love the energy, and I don't say that so often, but yeah, no, I love it. Definitely, guys, check out the link. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Also, go check out Nicoa's channel and subscribe as well. And if you're on Spotify, do us a favor and hit the follow button. All right. And then again, guys, it's a pleasure having everybody